Hey, what's up, everyone? I just want to share some thoughts and opinions I have about the 2023 NFL draft prospects, particularly at the quarterback position. Starting up, we have Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I think these guys are 1 and 2 or 2 and 1, depending on who you ask. Bryce Young, he was born in Philly, raised in California. He went to Alabama, and he won the Heisman Trophy in 2021, which are huge green flags. Statistically, he led Alabama to 13-2 and 10-2, and he had a ton of passing yards, over 4,800 both seasons, and he had a ton of touchdowns with not a lot of interceptions. And I'm going to be saying the same thing about CJ Stroud too. He led Ohio State to 10-2 and 11-2. He had 4,400 passing yards in his first season, 44 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. And he followed that with the same number of interceptions, just a little less touchdowns, but even a better record. With CJ Stroud, he's from California and he's the youngest of 4 children, so it's great to see that he's the most loved one. He went to Ohio State where he backed up Justin Fields for a year and then he started the next 2 years. And it says here that he's touted for his decision making, leadership, and accuracy. Now, which should the Panthers take with their number one pick? I'm going to lean towards Bryce Young, but that's only because he literally went to Alabama. So he was coached under Nick Saban, and they just have a great track record of playing smart situational football, which I just love. And it makes it a little safer given the recent success of guys like Tua and Hurts. And fingers crossed, Mac Jones. I also just think he has a really cool name. He's from Florida, went to Florida, but he barely played in college. In his 3 years, he only had one full season starting where he went 6-6. His stats are good, but they're not eye-opening crazy or anything. He only threw for 2,500 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions is way too many for 17 touchdowns. He ran for 9 more touchdowns, so I guess teams can use him like a Cam Newton type in the red zone. And his completion percentage is really low, but I don't really care about this too much because we literally just saw Josh Allen, Lamar, and Hurts all learn how to throw after a year of NFL exposure. So completion percentage is clearly something that can increase over time. This guy just reminds me of another Florida man that the Falcons selected with their fourth overall pick a couple years ago, and that's Kyle Pitts. It's just a guy with a lot of athletic potential who needs to sit a year behind a veteran before he starts on his own. A lot of mocks have him going to the Seahawks and sitting behind Geno for a year, which I actually think is a perfect move. Next, we're going to talk about Will Levis. He's from the New England region, and he went to Penn State before transferring to Kentucky for 2 seasons. His stats are okay. There's not a lot of yards. There's not a lot of touchdowns. It's not that I don't like this guy. I just don't think I have enough great data points to make a strong opinion on him one way or another. There are some mocks that have him going as high as number 5 to the Colts, which is really high given these stats. Up next, we have Hendon Hooker, who is actually one of my favorite quarterbacks in this entire draft. He's from North Carolina, where he broke passing records for his high school, and he led them to multiple state championships. And he played basketball, which is pretty cool, and I'm sure will only be mentioned once or twice by NFL announcers. His college stats don't have too many yards. I mean, even this is more yards than Will Levis and Anthony, but his play is extremely efficient. His touchdown to interception ratio is absolutely bonkers, and he led Tennessee to a lot of wins. I think it was the second most in school history and the first most since 2001. And in his personal life, he wrote a children's book to help kids learn Bible scripture through sports, which I thought was pretty cool. Up next, we have Jake Haener. He's from California. He was at Washington for about 2 years before transferring to the Fresno State Bulldogs. He has really great stats. He has 4,000 yards, 2,800 yards, and he has a lot of touchdowns, not a lot of interceptions at all. Really high completion percentage. And honestly, I'm not sure why this guy isn't getting much more attention. He's not terribly flashy, but he can easily be picked up late by a team like Baltimore, who can develop him into someone who's better than Tyler Huntley at least. And he's a Pisces man. And if they don't want him, they can at least draft Stetson Bennett. Moving on, we have Stetson Bennett, who's nicknamed the Mailman. I'm sure Karl Malone is very happy with that title. He's from Georgia, he went to Georgia, and he's a Georgia legend because he won back-to-back national championship these past 2 years. Going down to his stats, he has a lot of wins, only one loss in the past 2 years, a lot of touchdowns, not a lot of interceptions, and he's clearly improved his passing game over the years. In the championship game, he had 6 total touchdowns, which tied the record with some guy named Joe Burrow. They absolutely destroyed TCU. who was led by this guy, Max Duggan. Now, other than having the best birthday of all time, Max is from Iowa and he has two older siblings who are both adopted from South Korea. His stats are pretty great. He's improved year by year. His first couple seasons may not look that great on paper, but I think all numbers have context, and in this case, Max faced so much adversity through injuries and was even benched during this time, but still won the starting job, led TCU to a national championship. He had Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome in 2020, and then in 2021, he played through a broken bone and tendon in his foot. And even the year they went all the way to the championship, he was a backup to start the season. I always love a great underdog story, and Max Duggan is the best example of one in this year's draft. Up next, we have Aiden O'Connell. He's a quarterback for the Purdue Boilermakers. He's from Illinois. He went to Purdue. He didn't play his first 2 years, and then he didn't really play his next 2 years either, so that's 4 years of school that he didn't even play. But then once he got a chance to start, he had 3,700 yards and 3,400 yards, 28 touchdowns, double-digit INTs in both years. Nothing special, but he's a pretty good late-round draft pick. Similar story for this guy, Clayton Tune, another Pisces man. He's from Texas. He went to Houston, and I absolutely love this stat page. I think it just shows slow, continuous, increasing progression over time. His touchdowns increase every single year, and his interceptions stay relatively low. But I think the last quarterback taken from Houston was Case Keenum, who also had pretty good stats in college, so I'm not really sure what to make of this page right here. All I know is that this guy just keeps getting better and better year after year, and I still see that progressing into the NFL. Now, second to last, we have Jaren Hall, another Pisces man. He's from Utah, and he went to BYU, where he was backup for Zach Wilson. And honestly, this is pretty great because he probably learned a lot about what not to do as a quarterback. His stats look really great, but so did Zach Wilson's stats. Zach Wilson only had one good year, though. This guy has 2 back-to-back really good seasons. I'm not sure how much of a difference that makes, since BYU definitely lost some credibility after Zach Wilson entered the NFL. And he shares the same birthday as Peyton Manning. Take it as you will. Lastly, I'm not even sure if this guy is going to be drafted. This guy is Tanner McKee. He's from California. He went to Stanford. And his stats are not that great. 2 seasons, about 2,000 yards in each season, 15 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, less touchdowns, more interceptions. Not a good record in both seasons. Not a good record overall. So I'm not really sure if this guy's going to get drafted, but maybe a flyer, Mr. Irrelevant type pick. Now, these have been my top 12 quarterbacks in this year's draft. I'd say Bryce Young is probably number 1, CJ Stroud number 2. I'm not sure how much I love Anthony Richardson and Will Levis because they both need work. They're not day one starters. And honestly, I think that Hendon Hooker has a lot of potential in this league if he's given the same opportunities as Richardson and Levis. Below Hooker, we have a bunch of solid, guaranteed backup quarterbacks who have the potential of being a starter one day. I don't think any of these guys are going to get day one looks in 2023, and it's really hard to predict which one's going to be successful. But if I had to pick them out of a lineup, I'd probably pick Jake, Stetson, Max, and Clayton. And honestly, even Jaren Hall can be added to the mix. And out of these guys, if I had to make a top 5 list, I'm probably picking Stetson and Max Duggan. I know that's kind of lazy to pick the title game quarterbacks, but you have to keep in mind, guys, that I don't watch college football, so I really have no idea what I'm talking about.